When we begin comparing military power between the United States, Israel, and Iran, the instinct is often to look at numbers, troop counts, tanks, aircraft, missile inventories. And those numbers do matter, but they don't tell the whole story, because modern military power is no longer defined simply by how much you have. It's defined by how effectively you can use what you have. And that's where the contrast between technological superiority and numerical strength becomes central. The United States represents the most advanced military force in the world, not because it has the largest army in sheer numbers, but because it has built a system defined by precision, integration, and technological dominance. Its strength lies in its ability to project power globally, to operate across multiple domains, land, air, sea, space, and cyber, and to do so with a level of coordination that few others can match. Israel, while much smaller in size, operates in a similar paradigm. It has invested heavily in high-end capabilities, missile defense systems, intelligence networks, cyber operations, and precision strike technologies. Its military doctrine is shaped by necessity. It cannot rely on depth or size, so it relies on speed, intelligence, and technological edge. Every operation is designed to be decisive, targeted, and efficient. Iran, by contrast, presents a very different model of power. It does not compete on the same technological level, at least not across the board. Instead, it emphasizes scale, redundancy, and adaptability. Its strength lies in numbers, large reserves of personnel, significant missile stockpiles, and a growing arsenal of drones. But more importantly, it has developed a strategy that leverages these assets in ways that are designed to offset its technological disadvantages. And this is where the comparison becomes more nuanced. Because the question is not simply which model is stronger. The question is how these different models interact under conditions of conflict. Technological superiority offers clear advantages. Precision-guided munitions allow for targeted strikes with minimal collateral damage. Advanced surveillance systems provide real-time intelligence. Cyber capabilities can disrupt enemy systems without a single shot being fired. These tools create a form of warfare that is faster, more efficient, and often less visible. But technology also comes with dependencies. It relies on complex systems, satellites, communication networks, data integration platforms. These systems must function seamlessly for the overall strategy to work. And in a contested environment, those systems can become targets. Disruption of communication or cyber infrastructure can degrade even the most advanced military capabilities. On the other side, numerical strength and redundancy create a different kind of resilience. Iran's approach is not to match technological sophistication directly, but to create pressure through volume and persistence. Large missile inventories, for example, are not just about firepower, they are about saturation. The idea is to overwhelm defensive systems, to create multiple points of stress, and to force technologically superior opponents to expend resources at a higher rate. This introduces a different kind of calculation. In a technologically advanced system, each asset is often highly capable, but also highly valuable. Losing even a small number of advanced platforms can have a significant impact. In a system based on numerical strength, individual losses may be less consequential because the strategy is built around scale. So, we are looking at two fundamentally different philosophies of warfare. One prioritizes precision, efficiency, and technological integration. The other prioritizes endurance, scale, and adaptability, and neither is inherently superior in all scenarios because effectiveness depends on context. In a short, high-intensity conflict, technological superiority can be nurtured. The ability to strike quickly, accurately, and with coordination can shape outcomes in a matter of days. But in a prolonged conflict where endurance becomes critical, numerical strength and the ability to absorb losses can shift the balance. This is where the psychological dimension becomes important. Military power is not just about capability, it is about perception. Deterrence, for example, depends on what an adversary believes you can do, not just what you can do. Technological superiority can create a perception of overwhelming dominance, but numerical strength and resilience can create a perception of persistence that even if you strike, the system will continue to function. And that perception influences decision-making. Leaders calculate risk not only based on capabilities, but on expected outcomes. If a technologically superior force believes it can achieve quick, decisive results, it may be more willing to act. If a numerically resilient force believes it can endure and respond over time, it may be less deterred by initial disadvantages. So what we begin to see is not just a comparison of strengths and weaknesses, but a dynamic interaction between different models of power. Technology versus scale, precision versus persistence, speed versus endurance. And underlying all of this is a broader question about the nature of modern warfare. Are we moving toward a future where technology defines outcomes completely? Or does scale, adaptability, and human factors still play a decisive role? The answer increasingly is that both matter, because even the most advanced systems operate within human and strategic constraints, and even the largest forces must contend with technological realities. So when we compare the United States, Israel, and Iran, we are not just comparing militaries, we are comparing philosophies. Different ways of understanding power, risk, and conflict in a rapidly changing world. And that is what makes this comparison so important, because it reminds us that strength is not a single dimension. It is a balance of capabilities, strategies, and perceptions. And in a world where those elements are constantly evolving, the real advantage does not come from having the most power. It comes from understanding how power is used and how it is perceived. If we move from the question of technology versus numbers to how that power is actually applied, the contrast becomes even more defined. Because military strength is not just about what you have, it's about how you use it across domains. And in this case, the divide between air and naval dominance on one side and asymmetric warfare on the other reveals two very different approaches to conflict. The United States has built its military doctrine around control of the air and the sea. This is not accidental. Air superiority allows for visibility, speed, and precision. Naval dominance allows for global reach, sustained presence, and the ability to project force far beyond national borders. Together, these capabilities create a kind of strategic flexibility that is difficult to match. With advanced aircraft, long-range bombers, aircraft carriers, and a global network of bases, the United States can operate almost anywhere in the world with relatively short notice. It can strike targets at distance, support allies, and maintain continuous operations over extended periods. This is power not just in terms of capability, but in terms of reach. Israel, though geographically constrained, operates with a similar emphasis on air superiority. Its air force is central to its military strategy. Given the limited depth of its territory, it cannot afford prolonged attritional warfare on its own soil. So it prioritizes early detection, rapid response, and preemptive or retaliatory strikes that are precise and time-sensitive. In both cases, the underlying philosophy is clear. Control the environment, dominate from above, and shape the battlefield before the opponent can fully engage. But this model assumes something important, that the battlefield can be defined and controlled. Iran approaches this very differently. Rather than competing directly for air or naval dominance, Iran has invested heavily in asymmetric strategies. This is not a secondary option. It is a deliberate choice. Recognizing that it cannot match the United States or Israel in conventional terms, it has developed methods designed to complicate, stretch, and undermine that conventional advantage. Asymmetric warfare operates on a different logic. It is not about winning quickly or decisively in a traditional sense. It is about imposing costs, creating uncertainty, and extending the timeline of conflict. It shifts the battlefield from clearly defined spaces to more ambiguous environments, urban areas, maritime choke points, cyber domains, and proxy theaters. Take naval strategy as an example. The United States relies on large advanced vessels, aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines that project power across oceans. These are highly capable platforms, but they are also highly visible and strategically significant. And Iran, by contrast, emphasizes smaller, faster, and more numerous assets, fast attack boats, naval mines, anti-ship missiles. The goal is not to dominate the sea in the traditional sense, but to disrupt it, to create an environment where movement becomes risky, where even a superior navy must operate with caution. This is a fundamentally different use of power. In the air domain, the contrast is similar. While the United States and Israel invest in advanced aircraft and integrated air defense systems, Iran has focused on drones and missile capabilities that can be deployed in large numbers and across multiple fronts. Again, the objective is not necessarily precision in the traditional sense, but saturation and persistence. And then there is the role of proxies. This is perhaps one of the most distinctive elements of Iran's strategy. Rather than engaging directly in every instance, it extends its influence through allied groups and regional networks. These actors operate in different environments, often with varying levels of autonomy, creating multiple points of pressure simultaneously. This has two important effects. First, it diffuses the battlefield. Conflict is no longer confined to a single front or a clearly defined area. It becomes distributed, harder to predict, and more difficult to contain. Second, it complicates response. When actions are carried out indirectly, attribution becomes less clear. Escalation becomes more complex, and technologically superior forces must navigate not just military challenges, but political and strategic ones. This brings us to a deeper point about the nature of modern conflict. Air and naval dominance are built on the idea of control, of space, of movement, of information. Asymmetric warfare is built on the idea of disruption, of uncertainty, of unpredictability, of time, and these two models interact in ways that are not always straightforward. A force with air superiority may be able to strike targets effectively, but it may still struggle to eliminate decentralized networks. A navy may control major sea lanes, but still face localized threats that disrupt operations. In other words, dominance in one domain does not guarantee control of the overall conflict. This creates a kind of strategic tension. Technologically advanced forces seek to define and manage the battlefield. Asymmetric strategies seek to expand and blur it, and in that tension, outcomes become less predictable. There is also a psychological dimension to this dynamic. Air and naval dominance can create a sense of control, of superiority, of the ability to shape events. But asymmetric tactics introduce doubt. They create situations where the next move is uncertain, where threats are dispersed, and where responses carry unintended consequences. And this uncertainty can be as impactful as physical damage because it affects decision-making. It influences how risks are calculated, how resources are allocated, and how strategies evolve over time. So when we compare these approaches, we are not just comparing capabilities, we are comparing ways of thinking about conflict. One seeks to dominate and resolve. The other seeks to endure and complicate. And in a world where conflicts are increasingly complex, where lines between conventional and unconventional warfare are blurred, both approaches carry weight. Because the reality is that modern conflict rarely fits into a single model. It is not purely conventional nor purely asymmetric. It is a combination of both, shaped by context, geography, and intent. And that means the outcome is not determined solely by who has more power or more advanced technology. It is determined by how effectively that power is applied in an environment that is constantly shifting. So the question is not just who controls the skies or the seas. The question is who can operate effectively in a world where control itself is no longer absolute. Because in that world, strength is not just about dominance. It is about adaptability and the ability to navigate uncertainty when the rules are no longer clear. If we move beyond capabilities and tactics, we arrive at something even more decisive in modern conflict: relationships. Because no country, no matter how powerful, operates in isolation. Military strength today is not just measured by what a nation can do on its own, but by the networks it is part of, the alliances it can rely on, the intelligence it can access, and the partnerships that extend its reach beyond its borders. This is where the contrast between strategic alliances and regional influence networks becomes particularly important. The United States has built over decades one of the most extensive alliance systems in modern history. These alliances are not just symbolic, they are operational. They involve shared intelligence, coordinated planning, joint exercises, and in many cases, integrated military systems. This creates a multiplier effect. The strength of the United States is not just its own capability, but the collective capacity of the network it leads. Israel, while smaller, is deeply embedded within this broader framework. Its relationship with the United States is especially significant, not only in terms of military support, but in intelligence sharing, technological collaboration, and strategic alignment. This partnership enhances Israel's ability to respond quickly and effectively to threats, while also reinforcing its position within a wider security architecture. But alliances are not just about resources, they are about trust. Trust allows for coordination under pressure. It allows for the sharing of sensitive information. It enables joint decision-making in moments where time is limited and stakes are high. And perhaps most importantly, it creates a sense of predictability. Allies know, or at least believe they know, how each other will act in a crisis. That predictability is a form of power. It reduces uncertainty within the network, even as uncertainty may exist outside of it. It allows for planning, for coordination, and for the kind of strategic coherence that is difficult to achieve alone. Iran operates in a very different way. Rather than formal alliances, it has developed a network of regional influence, relationships that are less institutionalized but often more flexible. These networks include a range of actors across different countries, each with their own local dynamics, but connected through shared interests and strategic alignment. This approach offers a different kind of advantage. It allows Iran to project influence without direct engagement. It creates multiple points of pressure across the region, often simultaneously, and it introduces a level of ambiguity into the strategic environment. Actions can be taken indirectly, responses can be calibrated, and escalation can be managed in ways that are less predictable. But this model also comes with its own complexities. Unlike formal alliances, these relationships are not always fully controllable. Different actors have their own priorities, their own timelines, and their own thresholds for action. Coordination exists, but it is not always centralized. This creates both flexibility and uncertainty, and that uncertainty is not just external, it can be internal as well. So what we see here are two different models of networked power. One is structured, institutionalized, and based on formal commitments. The other is decentralized, adaptive, and based on influence rather than formal obligation. And both have strengths and vulnerabilities. Formal alliances provide clarity, coordination, and scale, but they can also be rigid. Decisions may require consensus. Responses may be influenced by the interests of multiple actors. And in some cases, the expectations of alliance commitments can create pressure to act even when the situation is complex. Influence networks, on the other hand, provide flexibility and deniability. They allow for indirect engagement and can adapt quickly to changing circumstances, but they also lack the same level of cohesion. Actions may not always align perfectly, and the absence of formal structure can make long-term coordination more challenging. This brings us to a deeper, more philosophical point about power in the modern world. Power is no longer just about control. It is about connectivity. The ability to build, maintain, and leverage relationships has become as important as the ability to deploy military force. And those relationships shape not only what actions are possible, but how those actions are perceived. Perception, again, plays a central role. An alliance signals unity, strength, and shared purpose. It can deter adversaries by presenting a collective front, but it can also be tested. If an alliance fails to respond when challenged, its credibility can weaken. An influence network, by contrast, signals reach and complexity. It creates a sense that influence extends beyond visible boundaries, but it can also raise questions about control and accountability. And in both cases, perception influences behavior. Leaders calculate not just capabilities, but intentions. They assess not just strength, but cohesion. They ask not only what their adversaries can do, but how likely they are to act together or to act at all. So when we compare the United States, Israel, and Iran through this lens, we are not just comparing military systems. We are comparing ecosystems of power, systems that extend beyond borders, beyond formal structures, and into the realm of relationships, influence, and perception. And these ecosystems shape the strategic environment in profound ways. They determine how conflicts evolve, how escalations are managed, and how outcomes are ultimately decided. Because in a connected world, no action exists in isolation. Every move is part of a larger network of responses, reactions, and consequences. So the real question is not just who has stronger alliances or broader influence. The question is which system is better suited to operate in a world defined by complexity, uncertainty, and rapid change. Because in that world, power is not just about strength. It is about connection and the ability to turn connection into strategy. If we bring all of these dimensions together, technology, strategy, alliances, we arrive at perhaps the most decisive factor of all, sustainability. Because military power is not just about the ability to act, it is about the ability to continue acting over time. And that depends fundamentally on economics. The United States operates from a position of extraordinary economic strength. Its defense budget alone exceeds the total military spending of most other nations combined. But it's not just the size of that budget, it's the structure behind it. A vast industrial base, advanced research institutions, global supply chains, and a financial system capable of sustaining long-term investment in innovation and defense. This creates a form of military power that is not only advanced, but renewable. Israel, while much smaller, shares elements of this model. Its economy is highly innovative, particularly in technology sectors that directly support modern warfare, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, surveillance systems. Its military is deeply integrated with its technological ecosystem. This allows for rapid adaptation, continuous improvement, and a level of agility that compensates for its limited size. In both cases, economic strength enables sustained technological advantage. It allows for ongoing research, continuous upgrades, and the ability to replace or enhance capabilities over time. In other words, it supports not just current power, but future power. Iran operates under very different constraints. Its economy has faced prolonged pressure, sanctions, limited access to global financial systems, and structural challenges that restrict growth. On the surface, this would appear to be a significant disadvantage. And in many ways it is. It limits access to advanced technologies. It constrains large-scale procurement. It reduces the capacity for rapid modernization. But what Iran has done, and this is critical to understand, is adapt its strategy to those constraints. Rather than attempting to match economic power with economic power, it has focused on strategic endurance. It has developed capabilities that are cost-effective, scalable, and sustainable under pressure. Missiles, drones, and asymmetric tools are not just tactical choices. They are economic ones. They allow for the projection of power without the same level of financial investment required for advanced conventional systems. This creates a different kind of sustainability. It is not based on abundance, but on efficiency, not on overwhelming resources, but on the ability to operate within limits. And in some ways, this can be surprisingly resilient because systems designed under constraint are often built with adaptability in mind. They are less dependent on complex supply chains, less vulnerable to external disruptions, and more focused on long-term persistence. So again, we are looking at two different models. One is built on economic scale, technological innovation, and the capacity for sustained high-intensity operations. The other is built on endurance, cost efficiency, and the ability to operate under prolonged pressure. And both raise important questions because economic power does not automatically translate into strategic success. It provides options, flexibility, and capacity, but it also creates expectations. High-tech systems are expensive to maintain. Advanced operations require continuous funding, and in democratic societies, long-term military engagement can be influenced by public opinion, political cycles, and economic priorities. Endurance-based systems, on the other hand, may lack sophistication, but they are often designed for longevity. They assume that conflict may be prolonged. They prioritize staying power over immediate dominance, and they are less sensitive in some cases to the kind of economic and political pressures that affect more complex systems. This brings us to a deeper reflection on the nature of power. Power is often associated with strength, with capability, with the ability to act decisively. But there is another dimension of power that is less visible, but equally important: the ability to absorb pressure. Economic strength allows a country to project power outward, but endurance allows a country to withstand pressure over time. And in many conflicts, especially those that are prolonged or indirect, the ability to endure can be just as important as the ability to strike. There is also a psychological layer to this. Sustainability influences perception. A country that is seen as capable of sustaining operations over time may deter adversaries simply by signaling that it cannot be easily worn down. And at the same time, a country that relies on high-cost systems may be perceived as more sensitive to prolonged engagement, even if that perception is not entirely accurate. These perceptions shape strategic calculations. They influence how conflicts are approached, how risks are assessed, and how decisions are made. Because in the end, conflict is not just about capabilities, it is about expectations. What do leaders believe will happen if a conflict continues? Who do they believe can sustain pressure longer? Who do they believe will adapt more effectively? These are not purely technical questions. They are deeply human ones. And they matter because they shape the trajectory of conflicts. So when we compare the United States, Israel, and Iran through the lens of economic power and sustainability, we are not just comparing budgets or resources. We are comparing time horizons, how each system thinks about time, how it prepares for duration, how it balances immediate strength with long-term resilience. And in a world where conflicts are increasingly complex, where quick victories are rare, and where uncertainty is constant, that balance becomes critical because the outcome of conflict is not always determined at the moment of greatest acute. It is often determined over time through persistence, adaptation, and the ability to continue operating when conditions are difficult. So the real question is not just who is stronger today. The real question is who can remain effective tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. Because in the end, power is not just about how far you can go, it is about how long you can last. And in a world defined by uncertainty, endurance may be the most decisive advantage of all.